Welcome to the Decolonize Gaming. Oh, I'm not on camera, am I? Welcome to the Decolonize Gaming panel, where we're going to be talking to a variety of game designers, game players, professors of game studies, and from a variety of backgrounds. And I'm sorry, we don't have all the cameras up on screen. Just give me a second here. Yeah, I'm very much looking forward to this conversation, and yeah, really looking forward to what's going to come out of this. I'm sorry, we're a little bit behind schedule, but without further ado, if you guys want to start, maybe we'll start upper left corner, and just go ahead and introduce yourself. Chris, if you want to start.
Okay, sorry, I don't see the same corners as you, I think, or mine's all straight, so everyone's...
Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah, you go first. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, so hi, I'm Chris Patterson. I teach a course, I'm teaching a course on game studies right now, which I think might be the first, like, on-the-books game studies course here at University of British Columbia, the unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And otherwise, I write fiction under my matrilineal name, Kavika Guillermo. And I have a book on video games called Open World Empire, Race, Erotics, and the Global Rise of Video Games. And that is very much about the kind of colonial attitudes that can be reproduced in some games, and how games are embedded within colonial infrastructures, I guess might be a more other way to put it. But also about the aesthetics of mini games like cyberpunk, which I'm sure we'll talk a bit about. Yeah, so that's me. I'm in my office at UBC, as you can see here, living in Vancouver on Turtle Island. So good to, I think I've never been in a panel with these folks besides Silver Spook, so it'll be interesting, and excited to see how this goes.
Awesome. Yeah, always good to have you around, Chris. And now we're going to have Meagan. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, Tanzi, Meagan Byrne Nasikosun, Nea Aptawako Sisan, Hamilton, Ontario, Ochi. Hi, my name is Meagan Byrne. I am Aptawako Sisan, or federally known as the Métis of the Métis Nation of Ontario, and I am born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, right next to Six Nations, on actually the traditional territories of Six Nations. And I am a game designer. I've been working in games since, like, oh my gosh, 2015, when I put out my first game by myself. And then kind of meandered around, did a lot of like weird stuff in weird places, doing like gamification and like edutainment, that kind of stuff. Hating it, really hating the way of trying to create play out of people's like social struggles, which I hated that. And then eventually ended up kind of deciding that I needed to kind of take charge of what I wanted to do, and so I started my own studio. So now I have my own studio, Achimos Dawistan Games, and we're working on our very first game, Hill Agency, which is a cyber noir indigenous futurism.
Yeah, awesome. I have a picture of that somewhere up on this screen. I'm sorry, I'm somewhat I'm not organized as I would like it to be, but Hill Agency, I've been following this game for over a year, so I'm just gonna give it a quick shout out to anybody who knows anything about cyberpunk. You are a fake cyberpunk. You're a fake indigenous game supporter. If you don't know what Hill Agency, I'm just kidding. Hill Agency is the most based cyber noir indigenous futurist game that will ever be made ever. I'm pretty sure. No, it's not out yet. I shouldn't oversell it, but I've everything I've seen about it, and I know I've been on multiple events with Meagan, the indigenous game developers group, Discord group. If you are an indigenous game developer, consider ask Meagan and myself, or Elizabeth LaPonce and a bunch of other John Romero also. You might know the Doom guy. He's also an indigenous game developer. So we were on a panel thanks to Elizabeth and a bunch of other folks with John Romero. Yeah.
Jelly.
Yeah, so that's really cool that there's a lot of indigenous game developers. Hill Agency is one of these very good indigenous made and themed cyber noir games, and it's also in the adventure genre. I make cyberpunk adventure games. Who would have thunk that? Anyways, so I'm gonna stop selling your game for you, Meagan, but definitely support Meagan and check Achimoist. How do you? I'm sorry. Is Achimoistan?
Achimostawistan, which is a Cree word for tell us a story. So we're Tell Us a Story Games, and you can find us at achimogames.ca or on Twitter at achimogames.
Yeah, follow Achimo Games. That's the very very yeah. I'm not joking about that. I really want to play this game. Like I don't play a lot of games. I play like one game a year, like because I'm too busy doing other things, and then I do want to play Hill Agency when it comes out. Anyways, without further ado, Della, go ahead and introduce yourself as well. Sorry.
Hey, I'm Della Dragonus. I'm a Twitch streamer, a native Twitch streamer who lives in unceded Cherokee territory, and I mostly just play video games and talk about politics, but I also have a little bit of experience with game design, mostly like RPG Maker and a little bit of like Godot and Game Maker Engine, but not really a game designer. But yeah, I'm excited to.
Yeah. Again, thanks for being here. Della's been a long time friend of the Silver Spook community. If you're in the online like left, especially in the Twitch world, you probably know seen Della around. Does a lot of important behind the scenes work in a variety of capacities, and so yeah, we're always happy to have Della here. Della's usually around like when I'm doing these streams and other things, so we're just good to have you around and in the conversation. Anyways, so I'm sorry, I'm trying to get everything sorted out, but just to kind of throw it out there, because I know that the conversation can go in many directions, but I did want to, full disclosure, I'm going to be working with Kavika Guillermo or Dr. Chris Patterson, and sometimes Kavika Guillermo, depending on the setting, on a I will be guest lecturing, if I'm not mistaken, at a course at UBC on October 15th. That's not. I think that it's for the course specifically. Somebody asked. People are already asking, like, can I? Is it going to be recorded and this and that? But as part of this course, people apparently are going to have to play some Neofeud. So thanks for that. Dr. Chris, but also, I really feel like it's very much an important, it is I've been reading Open World Empire, that's on the screen over there. Open World Empire is a book that is very, it's very information dense. Like if you just say the word dense, sometimes people get the wrong word, but it's very information dense, and it's very, all encompassing of, a lot of things, race, erotics, and the global rise of video games. It deals with gaming. It deals with imperialism. It deals with like how that interacts with the gaming culture, the game industry, like where resources that are mined to make the actual hardware to the work that goes into developing video games. Like as somebody who makes video games for a living, most of my time I spend making video games. Like people think, Silver Spook, will you just spend all your time just like practicing, going off for 6 hours at a time, tearing down the global colonizer infrastructure? Like, no, most of my time I actually spend making video games. I'm like debugging C# code and then figuring out where the semicolon disappeared to. And then I'm like, oh my goodness, this is supposed to be 1366, 768, but I painted it in 2024 and it doesn't work on HD screens on a Mac, like Leopard or Snow Tiger or, Siberian Tiger version 2.6. And I'm like, oh my goodness, things are crashing. Most of my time I spend making video games, right? It's a lot of labor actually. And a lot of people don't recognize that a lot of that resources and the actual work that goes into that comes out of historically colonized countries. And a lot of that comes out of Asia in particular. And there's a lot of directions that book really goes in. That's really not enough. I was listening to a podcast you were doing recently at UBC where you're talking to some folks, and it's like you're saying like Dr. Chris Dr. Patterson, that like the impetus for the book was the game studies in the West or in the university system is very much it has a particular kind of view, and it doesn't describe a lot of things. Like, and so you said it's kind of like, I think some people are afraid of being called out for being like racist if they talk about certain aspects of how the games are made, where they're made. The fact that so much like Hollywood, the Hollywood of games is kind of basically Japan. And anyway, I'm going to stop going off on that because you can probably speak to this better. But I thought that might be a good place to jump off for when we're talking about decolonizing gaming. Maybe just like give us kind of like a framework on, open world, like, not, you have to give the whole synopsis of Open World Empire, but just kind of like describe what I was trying to describe there.
Yeah, hi. Well, the kind of like going catchphrase, I think it's actually the first sentence or second sentence of the whole book is like, we can all kind of agree that during the age of British Empire, that literature was one primary role through which like imperial assets and like attitudes were kind of disseminated to make British people seem like naturally superior and all that, and kind of created the cultural conditions for British Empire as we knew it. And we can kind of agree that Hollywood is doing something similar for American Empire, and it continues to do so, despite how many of us they try to include in their superhero movies or whatever. But the games are also doing that, and creating these other kind of, if not just creating them, but helping reproduce them in such a kind of tangible way throughout the world. But we also don't really know exactly like what it's creating, what kind of imperial conditions it's recreating, it's taking a part of, but also making anew. And so that's basically what the book is just about, is just trying to figure out, like, I call it open world empire, like the kind of IT driven empire in the sense of, the kind of resource extraction that often happens in Africa, but not always, the kind of labor then that gets, that Chio, this scholar in Hong Kong, has this term called eye slaves, which I think might be a bit much, but it's a way that he terms the kind of exploitative labor that goes on in a lot of factories, and not just in Asia, but also in North America as well. And so there's this humongous like regime of capital and of where games and computers and information technology comes from that I think we're not really understanding because we just don't really have the lenses for it. We're not quite there yet. We're still kind of in this. And it is very tied to American power, of course, and so it's not separable from that. But yeah, so it's mostly just trying to figure out how that works and to look at games themselves as the means to do so. Because designers and people who work in these game environments, even though they might not have like complete control over like how to create a game, they seem to know what's happening at least in that world, and can kind of speak to those issues. And so it looks to like AAA games and indie games and so on to try and figure that out. But as Silver Spook is saying, it is like dense with a lot of facts and information because it's just constant. There, it's trying to do a lot. I'm actually writing a. I don't know if you call it a sequel. It's like a companion book. I just got an agent, and so I'm very excited about that.
Oh, congratulations!
Sell whatever happens. But one of the things that we're going to try and work on is a kind of, how to take that book and put it more into a kind of trade, what is it called? Trade marketing kind of book that's a bit less dense, I guess, but also tries to get more at those political arguments a bit sharper. Whereas in this book, it's still an academic book. So it's like, yeah, it needs to have a lot of citations. It can't go to certain places. Like I wanted to talk a lot more about my own experience with games and people I've met in the game industry, but I couldn't really talk about that because it's academic books. You have to get by peer review. So I'm really excited about trying to take some of those arguments that are really resonating with folks and turning it into something that's a bit more, has a bit more political power to it. So yeah, I'm happy to be here again, and excited to talk about these subjects in that wider realm. Yeah, and I have a lot of other pithy statements, like the fact that the video game industry makes like $116 billion plus a year, and cinema makes like 38 billion or so. If we just look at box office numbers, the amount of people who play games is just out. It's like comparable to the amount of people who watch sports and take part in sports. It's just such a ubiquitous thing that I'm constantly like struck back. Or just I can't believe that people don't take it that seriously, like as a political thing. We'd rather talk about what people are saying over Twitter, right, than what people are saying over PUBG or something like that, even though that's, you know, according to some people, that's where a lot of rhetoric starts, a lot of political arguments begin, and then they get kind of experimented on and enter a world in different ways. And so I just take it quite seriously as a medium, and try to get past any of the arguments that are just like, why are you studying games? It's, you know, it's just a thing people do for fun, you know. I think we're past, but I keep encountering that like almost on a daily basis. So.
That's what they used to say about books.
Yeah.
Exactly.
They're like, oh yeah, like, oh, why? It's just reading. It's just like, why don't you listen to the radio, or why don't you listen to stories? And you're like, I don't know, just like books, man.
I've seen a lot of those arguments started like on MMOs and stuff like that.
Yeah, like we're really just going through the exact same thing that like books went through, movies went through. We're like, this is a baby industry. This is a baby medium. Like, it's just getting its legs. It's starting to walk now. So sometimes I'm like, yeah, the possibilities are endless, but it's not quite into like elementary school yet. So we're still kind of like early days. And it's so crazy to watch just how quickly it grew. Like I found this great emulator online. I've been playing a lot of like early day console games, and just like, that wasn't that long. I was like 2 decades, and look at where we're at now. So I mean, like, even books and films did not grow that quickly.
I grew up gaming, and I never thought that we'd ever have like a 3D handheld.
Right?
It's just exactly. And like, I'm playing games from like 20 years ago, and it's, you know, like you're saying, like, they're completely different. Like, their design is different, and then
yeah, and just the way they see the world, like you can really see early days that. Well, I think that's why Beth connected so much with John Romero's stuff, was because so much of the stuff was coming out of England, and it was really just based on like books, like the text adventures, the RPGs. These are all like, we're telling a story. Which is like fantastic. And then John kind of comes along and was like, so we can't do 3D, but what if we could do 3D with 2D? And people were like he blew people's minds, because he literally came in with a different worldview and just applied it. And like, I think that's what's so amazing about games right now, is just all like, there's so many tools that, you know, these people who are making stuff in like 1990 would have, like, they had to build from scratch, or they would have killed to have access to stuff like this. And we've got like tweens in their bedroom making, you know, games about their experience of dealing with the downfall of capitalism, which is like fantastic. I mean, it's also like, it's basically going to be the equivalent of fanfiction.net in like 10 years, but like, there was a lot of good stuff that came out of fanfiction.net.
They really has.
Thinking of actually Doom, because I was watching that Netflix. There's this Netflix documentary show called like The Movies That Made Us, or something like that. Right, and it's all about like movies from like the 80s and 90s, like when some of us were kids, and how that formed who we are as people. And I was just like, it was like Jurassic Park and Forrest Gump or something. And I was just thinking, like, I feel like if they did a show on games, and like it was like Doom, Final Fantasy VII or something, like, you could actually just see so much more of an impact, I think, if you just took particular genres or particular games in like the way, like Jurassic Park, I don't know if I'd call it a hugely politically impactful thing, but they seem to like push it as if it was like the biggest thing of our generation or something. And I was like, I'm sure if they did this with games, it would be I'd actually be more interested in watching it, first of all, of course, but you know, you could see a lot of similar things. Not to say that film doesn't, you know, hugely impact everybody too, but I don't think it would occur to anyone to do that really about games, or to many people at least.
That's one of those games, Final Fantasy VII, that people don't realize is extremely political. Like, you're literally blowing up reactors that are sucking the planet dry.
Yeah, Final Fantasy VII. Speaking of cyberpunk, it's the J cyberpunk RPG. You know, that people it doesn't get the same level of analysis, which I think it kind of speaks to that. You know, I was just coming off of there's this huge big not anti-Asian hate, but it's like, it's really trying to stop East-West conflict. I was just on a really big one last week as well. I've been doing a lot of work with that, and the gaming world kind of ties into that, and that's part of it. Part of it is this kind of disregarding in like the, let's say, adult and not to start generation gapping everyone, but it's kind of like adult versus people who didn't grow up in an age where games were a main medium. People didn't grow up with games as a nostalgia. Like all of us are millennial or younger, I think, and so that's a different world. But my parents still don't think that I'm doing anything serious. They're still, every time they come up to me, I call them up on the Zoom call to see the grandkids. They're like, so Chris, when are you gonna get a real job? So Chris, when are you gonna start teaching again? Yikes. You should teach. Your kids could starve any moment now because you're just some kind of like, you're just a homeless indie gamer, right? Indie game dev. Oh my goodness. Oh, I feel so bad for your wife. It's like they don't take it seriously. They don't, like, some generation, and that's part of it. Which is that the people that are high level administrators, right, that decide what gatekeep what and what does not constitute serious academic or intellectual discussion or research, right? They decide, right? And those people say that, well, I mean, that's not really valid. I mean, at best, let's talk about how terrible it's destroying all the youth, right? It's destroying all the kids, and we got to undo all this gaming and get people back in voting for Clintons by making them watch terrible Hollywood propaganda movies again. Or let's figure out how to like use Battlefield 2042 to start World War III with China and the Belt and Road Initiative. It's kind of like, I don't know what this gaming thing is, but let's just try to figure out how to fold it into the empire or get rid of it. And I have this suspicion that it's just like, they're all just Gizmo from, they're like Gizmo from Gremlins inside of my children's brain. They're like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, like the Splinter, and all these creepy Japanese gangsters are coming in, and the Yellow Peril is going to take my New York City and my children. Danny's going to be taken from me because he's playing the Japanese Asian video games. It's the deep Yellow Peril, Red Scare, like invasion of the Nintendo Power Glove Asian body snatchers coming into you. It's kind of this. I know I just said a lot of words there, and it's a lot going on, but I think there's a deep psychology in the Western world. I mean, I'm coming off of a big East-West panels, but that's a big part of it. And then there's also so there's the adult child thing, and then there's the children who don't have as much, the younger millennial Gen Z in the Western world that don't have as much of a, I want to write this song. It's called "Don't Fear the China." Don't fear the Asia, what is that? Don't fear the Reaper. But I'm gonna rewrite that song as I do this for fun as part of my political activism. Is just recuperating pop and rock garbage songs to make them into bass songs. And but it's like why is everybody afraid? But the young people aren't, right? They're like Final Fantasy VII, right? It's just like teenage, it's like Street Fighter 2, Final Fantasy VII. These were just like Asian created products that have a different Western American centric worldview that's like kind of normal to us. And I think that's a part of the that's, I don't know. I'm saying many things, and I don't know if this is resonating everywhere or if I'm just kind of going off into my own head. But anyway, I'm stop talking now, and anybody can react to that.
Yeah, no, I think for a lot of us it connected. So I didn't really realize why, and it's not just games and stuff. It was like anime and manga and stuff. Like, why did this connect with me so hard? And then it was years later when I was actually at university, I got to do a history of Japanese film course with this like amazing teacher who from Japan, grew up, was a filmmaker, decided to stop that, worked as a critic, did her PhD, and I did not realize what was going, obviously I wasn't going to know this, but I did not realize what was going in culturally, generationally in Japan at the time when a lot of this stuff was coming out. And I remember her, because she was talking about the very anti-youth rhetoric, a lot of older people not just disliking the youth, but almost actively, sorry, my phone, almost hating them. And then that feeling of having your elders, your family members, your community hate you because you're young and you think different. And then how then they kind of grew up and had families of their own and kind of realized no, this was not okay. And And what happened to my parents was not okay. Like World War II is not okay. What happened to them was not okay, but also what they did to us was not okay. And I think that was in their art, even though I don't think they knew that's what they were saying. And I think that's why in the West, especially I guess like that millennial group really connected with it, because I think in a way we kind of went through, or we saw that happening with Gen X, right? Where just like they being mocked for calling out what was clearly a denigration of the human soul with capitalism, and calling it out and being mocked for it, and being like not hated. I never got the feeling like that, but I think it was because of that whole Canadian like niceness. So it's like, oh, we say please and thank you, but like it's yelling without raising your voice, that kind of thing. And I think that for me is at least why I connected so strongly with a lot of these games and anime. And I think that's why I like art so much, because I think a lot of times we say things that we don't realize we're saying because we're trying to figure out the words to say things.
Definitely.
Yeah, like Della, what's your favorite? I know you guys are playing some of the newer games. Just I don't know if this really helps, but on that kind of topic of how we're not. I think in a lot of games there's a lot like, well, some of them are backwards in the sense of, or I think Chris, you said they're 15 years behind in the first person shooter genre a lot of the time, but some games that are being created are kind of like ahead in a lot of ways. I know that you folks are playing the Undertale sequel's latest chapter.
I totally want to talk about that, but I feel like if I do, I'm gonna spoil a whole lot of stuff.
Okay, well, don't talk about it if you don't want to talk about it. But I did play Undertale. I thought that was one game that was yeah, like that's one of the games I've actually played all the way through in the last 10 years, because I'm just terrible at finishing things. Like I used to be a completist. Like I'd play Mario and get the best ending for every Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo, and PS PlayStation game, and now I can barely finish a game because I'm too busy making games and doing other things. But yeah, but that's one that I did play all the way through.
I could share my weird theory about at least why I was attracted to Japanese games, and I think a lot of, especially during the War on Terror, growing up I was in Las Vegas during most of that period, but just being in North America, I feel like I connected a lot with manga and Japanese games and anime, partially because they're kind of like coming after Japanese Empire, and there's this theory.
Yeah.
In philosophy of the Owl of Minerva flies at dusk kind of thing, where it's after some big event has happened, that's when you have some kind of wisdom, that's why they say Plato and Aristotle both came after these huge wars in Athens, and why Marx was also writing at the pinnacle of British Empire. And so I feel like having an empire in decline, or just as a kind of past tense, was such a big thing that had shapes art and culture in such unique ways. Not to say that Japanese games and media don't of course have their own kind of power imbalances and racism things like that. That's just part of most national media as well. But them being an empire is also, or being I guess once an empire. And if you think about it, they've never really. It's hard to say what could have happened, if the U.S. ever actually pulled out of Japan, which they never really did, right? We still have all these military bases there. And so it's almost like we're still, in a sense, at war with all of these countries.
Yeah.
Military bases filling out. And we're just preparing for any moment. And so it kind of creates this art scene that's completely, and because they couldn't have their own standing army for any offensive purposes either, according to the laws that they signed. So it was everything went into art and culture. And it was very reflective, right, on what have we done? Who have we been? And I think as an American during War on Terror, especially, that really appealed to me, because I was just what have we done? Where have we been? This is some serious shit. And even though, of course, people think Japanese games and stuff are just funny and silly and soft and cute, I feel like that's just to disarm you, right? So that you go into
yes.
getting what's actually about to happen, which is often some pretty deep shit.
Yeah, like they have like that precarious position where it's like they have once been colonizers, but they were like colonized. So like a lot of their a lot of the rhetoric when it comes around like colonization and like liberalism and stuff like that tends to have like a slight colonized lens to it. Then I didn't realize that's what attracted me to like anime and in JRPGs and stuff like that. Like one of my favorite things is Gundam, and it's literally about a colonized people who decided that enough is enough. They're going to push back against literally the entire Earth. But you know the way that they characterize it though is kind of frustrating because like liberalism loves to create an enemy that's worse than it. So it's like, well, you could be with them, and or you can be with the good enough side, and it's frustrating because the villain, the colonized people, are literally portrayed as Nazis.
That is such a good point. I've been rewatching Dirty Pair, and I was like, yes, that's exactly what happens in most of these episodes.
Because it's like,
I was like,
go ahead.
Sorry, what? I was just gonna say, like, oh, it was a really nice change when it turned out that one of the villains wasn't a government power or anything like that. It was just some crazy scientist who was like experimenting with genetics, and then that was a whole thing. Sorry, I just watched it last night, and I was like, he got the right answer, and he brought the ancient alien back to life, but he was mad because it didn't look like a perfect human. So he kept messing with it, even though he got it right the first time. And I was like, there is something deep here, and I don't know what it is, and I want to examine it.
Yeah. I sorry, I had a point and I was trying to get it out. And...
Oh, sorry.
No, it's my bad. I wasn't. It was just overthinking. But yeah, I've noticed that in a lot of especially like very liberal, very trying to be progressive kind of works, because like Gundam is like very anti-war, but it literally shames colonized people for wanting to push back and have independence and sovereignty. And I noticed that in a lot of like, especially stuff we play now. Like I've noticed that there's a lot of very look at those people who are trying to get independence. Why would they want that? And then they always frame it as like fascism.
Oh yes, that famous discourse. Yeah, no, it's like it's a yeah, like there's a lot of the way that the protagonists are framed and the antagonists, and when you push back as a colonized people, being turned into this kind of it's an ethno state that you're trying to build, or you are the it's a black or brown or yellow fascism. I mean, it's very like the yellow peril and the black fascism is what black nationalism is very tied together. When you really think about it, and it's just to kind of throw it back into your ballpark again, Chris. But I was thinking about there's something you said, like when you're teaching like some of your classes, that you'll say to try to understand like the global context, and it's something that it really bears repeating for people who are in the Western world or speak a stormtrooper language like English, language of empire, English, French, Spanish. If you're a member of AUKUS, this clown show group of wannabe warmongers that are all has-been opium warmongers. Anyways, when you imagine a room with 100 people, I think you said, right, and it's like 90 plus people are, 25% is East Asian, 25% South, 25 people South Asian, and then like large swaths are black and brown, and then there's 5 white people in the room. And what's the psychology of that, right? You're looking around and you're like, oh my goodness, what if they all gang up on me? Oh my goodness, what are they saying about me? What if they turn on me? But also, we spent the last 300 years enslaving, oppressing, bombing millions, turning their entire landscapes into cratered, Agent Orange defoliated hellscapes. And we turned our own self into a hellscape. And we have no credibility on COVID-19, healthcare, housing, global peace, economic inequality, social, racial inequality. We have nothing to stand on. And we have to just keep bombing, enslaving, and stomping them all back down into the dirt, because if they ever stand up, they're gonna do exactly what we did to them. And look, they could do it because they have 96 and we only have 4. You know, and I thought that was very powerful for
Wow.
you know, that's something that you know, that's why you have to definitely check out open world gaming and all these other. I'm just kidding, but I mean, Dr. Chris, sorry, Dr. Patterson. Like, how do the students respond to that? Yeah.
Well, I actually just did that again in my games course, because I usually do that in like this course I teach mostly on like colonialism and race.
Yeah.
And so I didn't actually intend on using that example, but I ended up doing it anyways because I was asking students to play this game called Hair Na, which is a game where you play as a black woman who's traveling in different places, and white people especially white women, are trying to touch your hair, and so you have to like hit their hands out of the way. And it's like you can just go play it on web browser or anything. But some students felt really uncomfortable in just being in the shoes of a black woman, even in this like 5-minute long game. And so I was like, that's actually a very interesting feeling, and I want us to kind of sit with it and dwell with it a bit of like why that makes you. And the students seemed to feel uncomfortable almost any time they were playing anyone who wasn't white. It was just kind of like, oh, they were doing a kind of racial tourism or something like that. And then I had to enter that thought process. I was like, well, if you're if you're only comfortable in white male shoes in a game, that's like 2% of the whole world. And so like, why do you feel so uncomfortable playing as any of the other 98%? And so we did that whole exercise of having them imagine themselves in that room, and to kind of just understand that discomfort is part of being colonized in a sense, or being part of this colonial structure where we're not really supposed to be in the shoes of somebody else, I guess, without thinking that there's something really problematic about it. We can't like just take someone's narrative and roll with it. And maybe maybe we shouldn't, who knows, but it's just that discomfort is very telling, I think. And can make it really hard to like make other kinds of games, because it's not like people who work in games industries don't know this. Like, they know how uncomfortable it can get for some players to play as a black woman or something like that. And that's why perhaps there's so few representations of black women in games. Even though it's like it could be for the right reasons, it could also, create, or it could help kind of distinguish that from the very beginning before it even starts. So it's a really difficult thing. I'm just on the colonial side. I did want to say to recommend a book, which is there's this book called Soldiering Through Empire. It's a history text basically, but it's about like the U.S. empire from like the Philippine War up to World War II and the Cold War, and it's mostly about like soldiers who were marginalized people themselves in some way, or they were like South Korean soldiers who were paid to fight in Vietnam and things like that. And what's interesting about this book is it's the lines between fighting for freedom and fighting to decolonize are really blurred all the time. And so you get like soldiers who were in the Philippines who are killing Filipinos during the colonization period, and they're just like, these people just love their freedom, and so do we as Americans. Why are we killing them? Like, there's so many weird moments like that, like throughout the Vietnam War and all these wars where the soldiers, who are mostly like black and brown soldiers themselves, suddenly realize that, oh, they love their freedom like we do, and we are killing them for it, and yet we label them all as communist or whatever, as if freedom has nothing to do with why this war is happening on their end. So it's a really interesting book for that reason. It just tries to lay out like how, freedom is often just invoked as an American thing, and it's very difficult when anyone else is fighting for their freedom to see it that way, or to see it as a kind of multiple things that can coexist at the same time.
That's also why they don't have conscripts anymore, because like a lot of the people who got conscripted either started strikes in the military, or they fragged their officer.
Yeah, I think like one of the last chapters of that book is actually about that exact thing, like the strikes that went on during the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of war, like it is a place where a lot of people get radicalized. Like here in Hawaii, that people, if anybody asks, if you don't know, that's the Kanaka Maoli flag. That's not the official flag of Hawaii. This is the official flag of Hawaii, of the sovereign, illegally occupied country of Hawaii. In case you're wondering, speaking of indigenous nationalism, which I am one. But in Hawaii, the part of the sovereignty movement to ask, not it's really just asking the United States to actually follow laws for the first time in its existence. It never does. It's the greatest violator of international criminal court in UN and Geneva Convention rules that. But there's no international law is the joke. Well, there is, just it never gets enforced. And here in Hawaii, what we want is the United States to follow the UN High Commissioner and Human Rights Director's actual ruling, which is that the United States is an illegal military occupation and a fraudulent annexation, and the sovereign country of Hawaii's rules must be followed, and the U.S. military should immediately withdraw all of its Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines and its bases and its giant half of the Death Star in Pearl Harbor immediately, and stop using us to get the share of China, as Mr. McKinley, your war criminal from your failed U.S. empire, would and all of his predecessors have continued to do, including Biden. So, but part of that was a lot of the movement was in the Vietnam War. Hawaiians, like my own parents, who were indoctrinated, forced indoctrinated. Hawaiian language was banned in Hawaii in this time until 1986. It's still illegal in Hawaii to speak Hawaiian. You can be arrested in 2018 for saying Hawaiian words in a court of law in Hawaii, like Kale Koaka'eo, professor of Hawaiian language on Maui. But anyways, so the Hawaiians who were went to Vietnam after being brainwashed by the American conditioning system. There's no education system in the United States and in the West generally, I would argue. And so they were told that you're going to fight for freedom and democracy. Uncle Walter Riddy, we have Dr. Keanu Sai, the people that are currently at the forefront of the fight, a lot of them, the Native Hawaiians at the forefront of the decolonization of the illegal U.S. imperial occupation of Hawaii as a means to make war in Vietnam. The staging ground for Vietnam, Iraq, the B-52s that took off in Hawaii and bombed Afghanistan, Uyghurs in Afghanistan, by the way, 2018, one of the largest single day of bombing in Afghanistan, was practiced and staged in Hawaii, and the B-52s took off and they bombed Muslim Asians in East Afghanistan. And that the people who I was on Mauna Kea as well in the scientific imperialism as well as military imperialism at Pohakuloa military base, which is expanding up there right now. They're bombing 30 miles from where I'm streaming here. That whole Uncle Walter and all of these Hawaiians who went to Vietnam, and they were killing people who had more in common with them, and they came back and they said, "What was I burning? Why was I smelling napalm in the morning? Why was I burning all of these indigenous people's villages?" And America stole, and then they went back and read. They're like, "Oh my God, the United States sailed the gunboat in front of Iolani, the most advanced technological country in the world, the highest literacy rate in the world, most advanced, economy." Speaking of nuclear submarines, Hawaii invented submarines when the Jules Verne was. White people were writing books about, Captain Nemo sailing under the sea a mile in the Marianas Trench. We already invented submarines, Kalakaua, in the mid-1800s. We had a universal healthcare system 25 years before any European country thought about doing that. Otto von Bismarck brought the first one to Germany. So this history was stolen from me and from them. And when they found out that that's who they were fighting for, the empire that had destroyed them, they were at the front lines of stopping the bombing on Ko'olave, military practice for what they would do in Asia. Again, stopping the bombing at Pohakuloa. I have friends that are and people that are activists in our community that have lost half their weight. They're have permanent illness from being on radioactive Hawaiian ground that America was bombing on Mauna Kea, that same place I was talking about, where they're trying to build a massive mega project. Anyways, that's why I know it's kind of I'm very flippant when I say it. I have a lot of people that are working for terrible to tie this back into gaming and open world empires. There are a lot of people that I know that are working for terrible, as Stephanie Sterling might call it, the triple capitalist destructive game companies, these giant game companies making games like Call of Duty, that are about recruiting and also rebranding. Fallujah is being turned, and all these other war crimes in America are being turned into Russian crimes and into other other nations' crimes in these video games that are coming out, by the way. This is something that is completely being glossed over. In the same way that they steal history from you, 2 decades later, they just rewrite everything. The way Afghanistan is being rewritten as a little mistake so that we can go back into Asia again, because Afghanistan's in Asia. We're going to go back into South China Sea. It's the United States of amnesia, I think somebody recently said, is in gaming is just the next level of that. And it's part of why it's very important for all of us that are gamers, game players, game makers, game studies, people, educators that have to kind of like really push back against this in the games, in the way we talk about the games. I throw a lot of shade at all this. I'm not saying that you have to stop playing all of your, massive the online games, but we have to recognize that and I'm just as critical as movies as well. I call it, the Billionaire Philanthropist Arms Dealer Playboy movie. That's all the Iron Man movies and the Avengers. And Captain Star Spangled Underpants is just about, American military industrial democracy, freedom, and justice bringing. And we have to constantly push back against this because it is so it is what is standing. People ask Silver Spook, how can I help you land? How can I do land back? I just did a university acknowledgement, and I care about the indigenous people in the University of Wisconsin or University of Toronto, or and how can I help you, Silver Spook? You're a nice indigenous person. I care so much. Well, you know what you can do? You can stop the military industrial complex in your empire from occupying and bombing all of our freaking land and using it to blow up half of the planet. For their own profits. That's what you can do. Like, can I come take a vacation in a nice way? No, you can't come take a vacation in a nice way because America owns all the land, and the resorts and all of the vacation industry is all white, capitalist, foreign owned, and it's all bastardizations of our culture. You can't come take a nice, happy little vacation here till you help us undo. Anyway, I'm kind of just going off. So, anyway, Meagan, I'll throw it to you. What does decolonization really mean for you in gaming and in your people's so-called Canada? Oh, hello?
Was that me or Megan?
Oh, I'm sorry. Anybody, Megan, if you want to take it, but if you're not, anybody can take that. I'm sorry. I just went off. No, you don't have to take it.
Yeah. No, it's okay. There's like 5 different things I wanted to talk about, but I feel like everyone's talked about the fucking land acknowledgements to death at this point. So, though I did hear a really good one that was at a talk today. That was an Indigenous talk, Indigenous-led, Indigenous panelists, which really grounded it on the land of not just the speaker, but each person. But also really kind of brought home a lot of knowledge about why the treaties are so important, and that I like the language he was using to describe them as they are legal documents. These are not I don't know. Sorry, I'm just kind of going to go off about the Canadian conceptualization of treaties, because it held up the wampum, and because it didn't look like a piece of paper with writing on it. It just looked like a belt to people. And nobody was tasked or even thought it was important to talk about no, this isn't a piece of art. This would be holding up the Constitution and be oh, that'd be really nice on my wall. That disconnect that Americans have from their way of doing things and someone else's way of doing things, and that their way of doing things is always not just privilege, but is the right way of always doing things. So I really like this land acknowledgement, which was more like a treaty acknowledgement. And maybe that's what we need to start doing, is no more land acknowledgements, treaty acknowledgements now. So, yep, you acknowledge that you are on somebody else's land. Can you start talking about the rent agreement that you signed? And then the interesting thing about the treaties that were signed was by staying on the land, you are consenting to being a party of this treaty. For the settler, that was the settler side of the agreement, that you consented through your act of staying. That if you didn't consent anymore, essentially the idea was you could leave. Who knows where you're going to go? But I thought that was really interesting, that hearing from that something that we don't talk about when we do land acknowledgements is we don't talk about the language of the treaties. We don't talk about what they mean. We don't talk about how they were designed to perpetually check for consent, and that of course they're just not being, well, they're not being honored. That's the biggest thing about them. But yeah, there's also like, I mean, Canada's like how many different nations, and even within those nations are like different communities that do things differently. And I was actually like comparing it to getting into punk and how there's like subcultures of punk, and then you get too deep into your subculture and then you come out and your other friends in the other one, you try to start talking about punk politics, just like indigenous politics, and you're like, whoa, yours are totally different from mine, or they're the same but they're really grounded in where you are. And so they don't work because, you know, oh, we don't have salt water where we are, we've got fresh water, so we have a different water requirements or a different type of protection that we have to enact. So yeah, that's just how I've been kind of like thinking about these things lately. Getting old, so I'm getting deep into my subculture, my actual culture.
Yeah, just on the treaty acknowledgements, you know, like that's like that's really what, you know, that's what we need. We don't need UH, you know, professors or anybody at anywhere going, oh, I'm on Native Hawaiian land, like, you know, how about the United States, like, you follow your, you know, international law, please, how about that, you know, and like, you know, demand it, and then, you know, see what else we can materially do to try to make that happen. Yeah, the treaty. Yeah, I was listening to Dallas Goldtooth, who happens to be on a very good show. We're not talking about shows, but it's supposed to be the gaming decolonization panel. But Reservation Dogs, definitely worth watching. Dallas Goldtooth of the Indigenous Environment Network is a friend of the show. Our friend, a Palauan indigenous person, Shaw Merriway, comes on the show. That's Shaw's boss, is Dallas. Anyway, Dallas was talking about how, as an activist in Turtle Island, trying to stop fossil fuel, giant corporations from destroying the territory, poisoning the land and the water, Dallas was saying, you know, it's like a lot of times the argument from colonized perspective, white people will say, well, you know, I understand we did a lot of terrible things, and indigenous peoples of you Native Americans, you have the moral high ground, but we have the legal high ground. You know, we have the law on our side. You know, and that's the thing. And Dallas will be like, you have neither. You're like, but it's really hard to explain because like everything that the American education system, like at almost like at many levels, is completely, and not just that, and then after you get out, then there's the news media and then entertainment, right, and Last of the Mohicans and all these kind of things come out, and it just brushes aside. There's a deep, like there is a framework, there is a legal framework, and the colonizers are violating it all, you know, and it's just like, but there's this pretense that there's some kind of rule of law, you know, the rules-based order. It's like about, the Asian countries, you're all despotic, backward, authoritarian, but we have a rules-based international and intranational order. And if everybody would just follow the rules, just play nice by all the rules, you know, then we'll have a nice, peaceful, prosperous, free, Western, liberal, capitalist world, you know? But just, you got to play nice. And indigenous people in Turtle Island, you just play nice. Just play nice. Stop being disruptive on the pipeline, you know? And that's the way it's framed anyway, so... anyway, I'll just throw that out there, like, you know, like how the difficulty on trying to explain some of these things when everybody is so not educated.
Just the whole idea that they're framing us as like rioters when we're just trying to get them to stop polluting our fucking waterways. Oh my goodness. And it's like every single time whenever I try to like talk to somebody who's like a settler about it, they'll be like, well, you know, there's legal processes you can go with this. And I'm like, yeah, we've been doing that for like 600 years now. How much longer do we have to wait?
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's you know, so it does make it very difficult, like exactly what to do because, you I mean, to my mind, like, wherever we've had like progress, it does take, I look at, what the, obviously it's socialism with Bolivian characteristics, but Bolivia has had a very successful undoing of Canadian and American, corporate and paramilitary backed incursions and imperialism in their country for the lithium in particular, the coup for lithium. For Elon, we will coup whoever we want. Musk, obviously, in collaboration with Germany, by the way, gigafactories that were going to take indigenous peoples of Bolivia's resources and then give it for 3%, which is a neo-colonial deal, terrible deal. 3% of the revenue is going back to the Bolivians for their natural resources, to go to German gigafactories to make batteries for Elon Musk Teslas. And he just came out and say that the United States, Germany, and South African apartheid neo-feudal kings, techno kings, like Elon self-declared himself, and his master of coin, working together to steal the resources. Now, and this is a thing like for indigenous people, it's very like, it's a thing that I talk about a lot, which is that like, Bolivian indigenous peoples don't stop being indigenous because they aren't practicing the culture the way that white colonizers want to see them practicing it, like without technology, doing the powwow with no electronics. I know Meagan has talked about this before. Because indigenous Bolivians are scientists, technologists, advanced lithium enrichment factory managers, software engineers, that they are still an indigenous people. And I would argue that this kind of museum gate-kept version of indigeneity is part of how you keep. It's the African forced underdevelopment inside of settler colonies. That's what I would argue, right? Is when you call, well, you can be indigenous as long as you have no technology and you dance around in a mud hut and you have a nice little lei and you have a nice little hula skirt and you have a nice little canoe and that's it. But we gave you the phones and the cars and stuff. So just be a little boutique village so that we can come down and hug a little Hawaiian and feel sacred today. Or as Taika Waititi said. White people only want to see indigenous people riding on whales, talking to the ancestors, and playing a flute on the mountaintop. They don't want to see us as we actually are, as not a monolith, as people who have technology and computers and actually invented some of the greatest technology, not just the native Hawaiians, but also the great cities on Turtle Island. And I would argue that the Bolivians' economic power that they took with the MAS Socialist Party, which has Marxist economists, but also is led by indigenous environmental activists coming together in a mass organized front that doesn't have any particular leaders at the top of it. Although there's Evo Morales is one, but the people that were organized pushed out actual U.S. backed fascist coup that slaughtered, not with rubber bullets and pepper balls, but with fully automatic, Full Metal Jacket rounds, right? Just shot into the protesters and just murdered them. So they kicked them people out with economic, mass general strikes, that mass economic organization. They did have, Evo began as a military, paramilitary organizer in the countryside, but a lot of it was actual taking economic sovereignty and which needs a mass-based people's organization, but it also involves advancing quickly, and also I would argue in partnership with some Asian people who are capable of providing them with the actual concrete development. If indigenous peoples in Turtle Island and out in Hawaii to an extent are de-developed, not at the extent that people in Africa have been, I would argue that's part of the solution, is that we cannot. And this is kind of an internal indigenous to indigenous discussion, but we cannot ask Canada to please be nice, Canada, or United States, please be nice to us. Now, we can, of course, educate as many people within these settler colonies, but part of it, I think, is we have to take our, it's like asking Hollywood, please represent us nicely. Video game company, AAA game company, please don't make games that are about manufacturing consent to make war on Asian and Pacific Islanders. Like, I don't think they're gonna do that. We have to kind of, just figure out ways to build actual economic and other forms of sovereignty and power. And I'll stop talking. Yeah, but yeah, I think that's very important. I don't know. I know, Meagan, you said about that you said people said you how come you can't wear electric moccasins? I remember you talking about that one time.
Oh no, what was that? That was a while ago.
Okay,
I remember that one.
Yeah, I mean, like, I, shit, right? Like, I deal with weird stuff, and it's often coming also from, I think, people who say they have good intentions or say they want diversity, but yeah, like you said, they have an idea in their head of what that diversity already looks like. And I was like, well, how can you have diversity if you're assuming you already know what it looks like? I mean, yeah, I've struggled getting this game off. Like, I know you only seen it for a year, but I've been working on this since like 2017. I've lost like whole teams, just because like we couldn't get the funding, and a lot of it, nobody's saying this, right? But I can see like the ones that get picked versus mine. It doesn't look right. It doesn't look native. Except like, what does that mean? And like, why does it have to look your native way? And also, like, I'm AT, man. Like, we have a very specific, like, we have very specific cultural signifiers, regardless of the fact that we're kind of viewed as being, also white or also settler. Like, we're not just a pan-native group and plus settler. Like, well, at least especially for me, that's why I call it my Apatuaquasisan, because my family comes from a very specific place and we come from a very specific community. Like, we are Cree, we are actually Swampy Cree who got pushed out of Manitoba into the Moosonee Moose Factory, so we had to go live with our cousins, the Moose Cree, and like my family comes from that group, and so like my indigenous is not gonna look like the cowboy and Indians stuff. Like it would never have looked like that anyways, even if I was to make it quote unquote more native. So
I think we're Plains natives.
Yeah, everyone's a Plains native, or Haida if you're lucky. And apparently Haida is the only one that exists on the West Coast, which that's another infuriating thing.
Yeah. That's like they look at us, they think that we all have like headdresses and shit.
Right? No, we've never. So my family has hoods. Actually, a lot of the Cree use beaded hoods, and we had one in our family for a while, and then my grandma gave it back to her cousin because he rightly should have had it because he's the eldest of the eldest of the eldest. So he has it now. But like that was our traditional dress. It's not like there wasn't actually never really feathers. A lot, from what I understand, feathers were more like sacred items. You didn't put them on; they were for ceremony. But that's not to say that just because we didn't use it that way, that someone else didn't use it that way. But yeah, it's so frustrating trying to make a game that speaks to not just like your culture, but also your experience within your culture and the greater colonized culture, and trying to express feelings and frustrations and try to like work out a language of explaining what it is that you went through and using sci-fi for that end, and then have someone tell you it doesn't look right, which is just like, all right, like, would you have told William Gibson that like, oh, Neuromancer doesn't look right, this doesn't look like Future to me because I'm used to like the stuff from the 60s. You're like, no, like you don't know what it looks like because it's new. Yeah, and I guess, I guess the one thing I'd be asking for is just so people to like stop assuming you know what things look like.
That would be nice.
Right?
Yeah, just for the record, I will tell William Gibson, because I talked to this guy, you don't know what the cyberpunk future looks like, okay? Megan knows, and you gotta just. I do occasionally talk to the Gibson. I usually don't call him the Gibson, but I don't hack the Gibson. I don't hack the Gibson in 1995 with Angelina Jolie. But is that where I think I'm trying to make a hackers reference, and it all just got blown out by the cyberpunk lore that's all banging around my head as I'm making Neofeud 2. But yeah, no, I really think that like that's very important to me. Like that is, it's not just to me. I think it's very important to like like when I'm working on Neofeud too, like I'm inspired by like Umurangi Generation, a Maori indigenous created game, and also your work, Meagan, looking at Hill Age. Even though I haven't played it yet, and I have only been following it for a year, and I know you have been working on it a longer time, but just like looking at seeing you had this images of in Hill Agency, like a futuristic city. You can't really see it much in this little graphic. I'm sorry, I'm trying to manage everything myself, but you can't really see it.
Old.
But yeah, that's old stuff too. But I mean, there's just like indigenous people in the future, you know, with like advanced technology, indigenous people like inventing their own like holographic readouts with their own indigenous language on the side of a skyscraper that also has like art, and it has like the patterns and themes, and like that stuff was like really inspiring. And of course, like Black Panther was another, in its own right as a African future or Afro future. Is like, hey, look at that. There are advanced non-white peoples with their own culture, but also, they're still, because African. It's a longer discussion of the word indigeneity, but I mean, African people in Africa are indigenous to that country, right? And Vietnamese people in Vietnam are indigenous to Vietnam. It's a point that I often bring up as well. And so that is an indigenous future when you're looking at a version of a decolonized, right? Finally developed, or as Parenti would say, overexploited, a finally not overexploited Africa that's like thriving with inventing flying cars and vibranium high-speed rail and super advanced technology that's beyond anything that the CIA can dream up, but they all want to take it. And then that's also like it's authentically of the cultures and the peoples of Africa, their dress, their clothes, and all this kind of thing. And so that's something that's like, and that's very like important for, I think that kind of thing is very important. I'm trying to think about what does that look like for Hawaii, and like, what would a Hawaii 2077 that's like not necessarily utopian, but just like a livable solar punky, like just like not the solar punk, just like a normal indigenous advanced civilization, the way that the Chinese or the Turtle Island advanced civilizations had been, until they kind of had these barbaric, unusual people show up from this thing called Europe, and just kind of like, it's not really, to my mind, the more that I research this, and like listening to like great educators from Asia that have looked through this entire history, it's like, this is not really like, it's not really something that, now to people in the West, to American audiences, to Canadian audiences, the things that like you're creating, Meagan, and the things that we're talking about, these are new and they've never been seen before. But I would argue that like this is kind of a return to what was, when the most advanced technologies were invented. Paper, the people that took the guns and then showed up with gunboat diplomacy in Hawaii and then forced opium and silk and tea, opium into the bodies of Chinese and took silk and tea out and built the entire fortune of Britain and the United States. Those people that brought the guns back, the technology of black powder was not from Europe. That was from China. The technology of paper, right? That was not from Europe. That was they just came back with a bunch of guns. I was talking to Carl Jha, a great Chinese historian. It's like, we had the most advanced civilizations that with trade routes extending for two-thirds of the Earth's population through the Silk Road, all the way down into Africa, Turtle Island. Hawaiians, the Austronesian people, we were from Madagascar to Hawaii to Aotearoa, New Zealand. Taiwan was where we were actually from. There's a movie, Warriors of the Rainbow, Sirik Bale, which is about, and the way they talk in this, the indigenous people of Taiwan, it sounds like Samoan. I'm listening to them, I'm like, this, wow, we're like, and we had, I think that like anthropologists and historians are only beginning to discover like what was before, and that, a lot of this indigenous futurism and like seeing ourselves in the future, and it's going to be very different to any kind of Star Wars, cyberpunk that we know from colonizer countries, but it's going to be new to those audiences that have consumed that kind of media. But it's not, I would argue, it's actually a return to something else. It is new because it's the 21st century, but it's echoing, it rhymes with a buried history of the indigenous advanced civilizations of Earth, which were the greatest civilizations, and they will be. And they are actually. The most advanced indigenous civilization has the most advanced 5G technology right now. And the US is trying to make war, to stop that. So anyway, I took this in many directions. But just to throw it back to you, Chris. I think that I think that it's really a how do you see like things? Do you think that things are getting better? How do you see like because university, I know it's its own kind of world, and British Columbia is a interesting place. Holly, my partner's from there. But do you see like is it moving in a positive direction? Is it kind of, are people like how do you see things shaking out in the moment in this kind of dialogue?
I mean, I'm always, I can't, I feel like inside I'm an optimist, but then when I look at things, it's really, really hard to be that way. And the last time I was on here, our last panel I was on, I remember it was not too long after, this, after Afghanistan was really dominating the news and all that, and people were saying like, oh, it's just going to be like the Vietnam effect all over again, where the U.S. isn't going to be able to legitimately or illegitimately, or however they're going to do it, to invade another power for like another 10 or 20 years or something, which wasn't really even the case after Vietnam, but that the U.S. reputation is just going to suffer so much, as if that's the big takeaway from whatever that happened. But I was already at the time just like, actually, I think, the U.S. is going to get right back on the war train and find another power, because there's just so much profit to be made and so much at stake. And like the question isn't if, but it's like when this year, and who is it going to be, and all that. And there's been so much war rhetoric being ramped up around China, and I'm fearful, especially about places like Myanmar, places like even like the Philippines, which are kind of seen as in between right now in the way that their stance is between China and the U.S. Being the next like hot zones, like for whatever could happen next. And part of the reason I'm so pessimistic is I just listened to this podcast about the nuclear submarines that were just being sold to China, and this pact with the U.S. and the U.K. and Australia. And it was just incredible to me. I think it was an Al Jazeera podcast, and some of the people there were just as taken aback as I was at just the way that the Warhawks defended this, of being like, oh, this is just a rebalancing of power, as if there's anything that could closely, like anything that comes anywhere near the amount of power the U.S. has militarily in the world, with like 800 military bases. Like, you don't rebalance power. Like, there's just nothing. This is completely ludicrous. But then the thing they said that really shocked me was people are starting to really lose a lot of respect for China these days, and are looking to the U.S. for guidance. And I was just, so we forgot about Afghanistan within not even a month, and we just now officially know that some of the more recent bombings there were actually like war crimes, as they always have been. But we're getting more and more evidence of that. And yet still we're saying China's declining reputation. And it was just kind of one of those moments where I just felt this existential dread for like what exactly is happening in our world. And it reminds me a lot of games, actually, too. And some folks in the chat have been asking about this, exactly, like what makes first-person shooters so interesting. And I use the word interesting because I'm always of two minds about like how we absorb first-person shooters. Like, on one hand, like they like clearly people who are in the military who are recruiting use first-person shooters to try and recruit, young men. Like, that's seen as pretty common enough that we can say that's a thing. People in the military also play a lot of first-person shooters and learn how to, call weapons what they are and things like that. It does operate as this kind of like underground training in a sense, or cultural training. But if you play some of those games like in a classroom with like critically minded students, you'll have a completely different takeaway. And so I experimented with this with like Far Cry 2, which is already a pretty critical game, but students play that game and just immediately had we're just like, this is about human rights atrocities. That's what this game is about, even though as you're committing them. And then I think the very first Modern Warfare game, which, like, as Silver Spook is saying, like, it is like enhancing colonial power. I think that's one of the main effects of these games. But at the same time, you go back and play that game, one of the very first thing that game asks you to do is shoot a bunch of like people who are sleeping, which is like hands down a complete war crime. Like, you cannot just do that. And I've never really seen a movie where the hero goes in and shoots people who are sleeping. But you do that in the game in the very first level. And then there's parts where you have like this where you can see in the dark, or you have night vision goggles, and then you see soldiers cowering in the corner who can't see anything, right? They have no weapons or anything, and you just shoot them. You just slaughter them. And sometimes your soldier mates will say things like, "Oh, this is just way too easy," you know. And so like there's moments like that in those games that if you like actually get students to play them, and if you replay them yourself, like I remember the first time I played them, I saw the War Machine more for what it was than I ever had before, because those moments are so true to life. And it was just like I was just amazed by it because I hadn't seen any movie except maybe like a documentary here or there where they actually talk about those kind of war crimes. But then funny enough, like in all the discourse about war crimes as they are represented in games, you never see those particular games mentioned. And I think it's because, you know, they're supposed to represent like American and like white supremacy power. And so we're just supposed to assume that they're like untouchable. We can't talk about those things, but the game makes it very, very explicit that you are doing these things that would by any like by any sense of the term would be complete, like war crimes would be completely immoral. And so it's just a fascinating genre for that reason. It continues to fascinate me for that, because if you see it for like if you take it more seriously, I guess it has a lot of moments like that are just completely shocking. That things I don't see that happening a lot in like film and literature where they take it that far.
Yeah, you know, just definitely like going back and like I'm kind of on this like decolonize my stormtrooper training, which is like all my game and movie consumption, because that's my opinion. It's like the entire education system and the entertainment system in the entire Western world is just completely it's just building imperial soldiers, subjects, and accountants to manage it. That's why I you know, George Lucas only brought up the fact that the Ewoks were a metaphor for the Vietnamese in a DVD commentary in 2004. So that's one of my criticisms for games that are in media that are trying to say something, but they say it too quietly, and then they make billions of dollars working for Hollywood, which is the propaganda arm of the military-industrial complex. But at the same time, I do read when I constantly drop that metaphor into just things that I'm saying, you know, because I do view like a lot of these. There's a lot that you can see by going back and looking at media from the 80s, 90s, 90s, and etc. You know, in the way that you look back and, you know, like, oh my goodness, that 90s comedian, that's so cringe, what you're saying. But that's just like, everything was terrible at that time. It's just that everybody was so deeply imbued and invested in it, and they didn't even realize how terrible that they were being. But it's not just like words that were racist, sexist, etc., ableist that they were saying at that time. You know, like the R slur, everybody was saying that. Definitely in the in the black, you know, the Half-Life mods, what was it, Counter-Strike, the original first-person shooters, they were saying that all the time in high school, and everybody was saying that. And now it's like, that's a big problem. But it's not just those things, you know, it's like everything in the entire gaming media. I was like playing StarCraft. I went back and played I have a whole stream that I did on YouTube. StarCraft is a colonizer simulation, you know. It's just let's go to space. And, you know, if you look at the dynamic of it, right, it's like, you show up, and also this is how I know I'm doing some indigenous decolonial education with our kids. Like, that's why we homeschool here at the Silver Spoon Cooperative with myself and Holly. We co-educate, and we don't give any of the American history book nonsense. That's a big problem. I mean, when you send your kids to a public, private, charter school, you're going to have Thomas Jefferson was the good guy. Critical race theory is banned in 28 and counting states, by the way. And that's not even as radical. That's not even as true as we need the history to be. But the kids, when I first played StarCraft, I was like, oh yeah, the Terrans, that's awesome. You know, I'm like, you know, I'm kind of like a white guy. You know, I'm like 3/5 of a Luke Skywalker, right? So I'm the Terrans, right? I'm showing up in somebody else's planet, and I'm gonna take all their stuff. And by stuff, I mean minerals, right? You go to a planet, you put down your command center. With SCVs, that's like the Canadian branch of Earth StarCraft is the Canada, right? That's where 75% of all mining stocks and oil, 75% of mining stocks is headquartered in Toronto, right? And 3 oil companies in a trench coat wearing a stupid hat carrying a gun. That's Canada. So you drop a command center, you make little miners, right? You harvest minerals, right? Unclear which one. Is it lithium? Is it coltan? Is it copper from Chile? Is it African blood diamond? Which mineral is it, right? Is it the one that goes into the NVIDIA headset manufactured in a sweatshop in India? You know, but it's minerals. You go and you get minerals. You turn the minerals into what? You turn the minerals and you get Vespine gas, right? You get the Vespine gas, which is what? I looked it up. It's a hydrocarbon, right? It's oil. It's oil and gas and coal, right? So you show up in you show up in Char, and then you take everybody's Vespine gas and the minerals, right? And then you use that for to make Marines, to make flamethrowers, to make AR-15s. I'm sorry, pulse rifles. You make battle cruisers, right? Giant starships. You make tanks, right? You make Northrop Grumman tanks. I'm sorry, siege tanks. You make wraiths. You make stealth craft. You make Lockheed Martin bombs, right? You make nuclear missiles, right? And then you kill everything on the indigenous planet that you're on. You take all of that to make more weapons of war. You go to the next planet and you destroy that entire planet. And then you go to the next one and you take all that. And then there's this great scene, right? This is what really made it for me. And then the Terrans, the Zerg, are this hive mind, despotic, authoritarian, Asian-coded insect race, kind of like, I don't know, Starship Troopers made by fascist Heinlein. And then Jim Raynor says at one point, "Oh my goodness, what have these Asians done to infect this nice Terran command center?" And he says, "I don't like it. I don't like what these Asians have done. I'm sorry, insectile alien race. I don't like what they've done. Burn it all." And they flamethrower the entire thing. And it reminded me of when America incinerated 10,000 Hawaiian, Chinese, and Vietnamese and Japanese cooperative homes in Kalihi Palama. You know where I'm from? And they burnt it all to a crisp, and then white armed guards and policemen forced the Hawaiian and Asian and Pacific Islanders into the blaze at gunpoint in 1900 that nobody knows about because there's no history and there's no education system in the Western world. And I was like, or like, I don't know, just burning off millions of Koreans and Vietnamese in nuclear fire and then crying for 10,000 American troops, right? And I was like, oh, yes, that's right. This is a colonizer simulator. But I played it and I was like, oh, yeah, I'm the Terran. This is awesome. I like blowing stuff up and it's really cool. And I harvest resources. And then I got Brood War and I got the expansion where a black dude and a dark woman are the evil, duplicitous manipulators of nice white men. And Euro-coded aliens called the Protoss. Anyways, I'm reading some things into this, but I think I'm not. I don't think that the people who are working for Silicon Valley, which is the digital arm of the military-industrial complex of the U.S. empire, specifically thought to put that in there. I think that this permeates the entirety of the Western world and especially the United States so deeply that they can't even recognize. But my kids could recognize. Wait, the Zerg are kind of like the aliens are kind of like the good. They're kind of like the. Why are the humans showing up and taking all their stuff? Like, they could figure it out. I didn't tell them that. I've played StarCraft with my kids, and they're like, hey, I don't want to play the humans. I want to play the Zerg because they're like just defending their home planet. Why are these people showing up and taking all the things? They were there first, And I was like, maybe I'm doing I don't know if maybe I shouldn't be doing that, but I think there's something to that where you do play these things critically in a certain mindset that can reveal much of. And to me, it revealed a lot of the stormtrooper in myself. And I always say I'm half stormtrooper because I speak English. You can't say the word the civilized. What the hell does that even mean, right? It doesn't mean anything. That's what the UN says. The civilized countries they condemn genocide. But who are the civilized countries? AUKUS, US, UK, Australia, France, Canada, right? Very civilized, right? Committing genocide against residential school children. Very civilized. Anyways, yeah, that's just something I discovered when I was playing that game. But yeah. Somebody, I'll throw this out there. Somebody asked, what do you think about FPS games? I mean, I play Doom a lot, and I think that Doom isn't that bad because, it's kind of cartoonish, and it isn't like immediately demonizing anyone in particular, and it's kind of ridiculous. And so and also, it's made by John Romero worked on it, so I just have to be nice to it. No, I'm just kidding. But I do think that like there is a place to blowing off steam, and I don't think that just the games are just bad. I think that we have to recognize deep narratives and deep social, psychological, and civilizational. These things are manifestations of deep narrative and structures that are not even recognized. Not even in academic discourse. I think a lot of the time. That are, they're just coming out in the media. So, yeah.
This is just one reason why I tried to make it a point at the beginning that, like, I think this course I'm teaching now, which this is the first time it's ever been on the books, but I think it's the first games course ever at UBC that's like officially on the Books of Games course, which is it just seems like it's just sad, I think, because again, like if you gave all my students like Call of Duty and just had them play it by themselves, nobody would think about that game and like all the different ways that you could read it to be about um, American power or about war crimes and all that stuff. They would just play it and just to play and have fun. And so the fact that there is no space on most universities, like or most anywhere, to play a game and if you just say like play this and talk about it with the group about how it makes you feel about politics, that just changes everything. Like people will have completely different, will pick up completely different things from it. And I think part of it is just those game companies and media just trying to get us to see games as things that you turn off your brain, while you're doing it. And then we were supposed to rely on other things for that. And so that's what I find really sad about it is that like there's this thing out there that's so rich and has so many different possibilities, and we just continue to ignore what it does and what it can do. And but I did want to ask a question actually to you and Megan about games, and I'm more like thinking like why cyberpunk. And I know you both talked about this quite a bit in other spaces, but I think cyberpunk is a really fascinating genre, just like first-person shooters and just like anything, and it's capable of doing a lot. Clearly doing a lot of different things, and I feel like there's in academia at least, I've had to really push back against a lot of people who seem to reduce it to being like, oh, it's just about like how about whiteness overcoming Asian technology kind of thing, which I think is true in some games and some like maybe Deus Ex maybe is a bit like that, or like The Matrix is kind of like that. But that's definitely not all that cyberpunk has done or does, especially when it's coming from like non-white American writers and stuff. And so, yeah, I'm just wondering if you two, I knew I wanted to get to this at some point, so I'm just hoping to push it a bit for you all.
Cyberpunk. I've talked so much, Megan. You go.
Sorry, can you just maybe because it's late here, you just like give me a quick summary of like what I guess which point you'd like or points you'd like me to touch on?
I'm wondering like why cyberpunk, like what is it about that aesthetic and that genre that appeals to you as a creator?
Actually, so this is an interesting distinction that I make nowadays. Is I'm doing cyber noir, and I make that distinction because noir as a genre I just thought was like incredibly apt for talking about the Indigenous experience in Canada, because I think that's all really I can speak to. Because noir is essentially about those who were broken by World War II being dropped in a system that wanted them either useful or dead. And I was like, how is that not a perfect example of what we exist in right now? So, because like I don't know, when I first was kind of like looking at cyberpunk, I was like, I'm not punk enough. I'm definitely like not. I'm still kind of like new to games as well. So I'm like, I think cyber noir was sort of like getting in the water up to my knees is how I'm kind of looking at it. But also because I grew up with noir, and it was the first kind of literature that I felt was giving a language to actually what I would call capitalist subjugation of its own, that it was not able to articulate in a way that I think we can now with the language of trauma and PTSD, but it was able to kind of show what it was like for mostly these guys, mostly men, but occasionally women. But the original noir were either guys who had come back or guys who had never gone in the first place, the draft dodgers, or they were too weak and they didn't get picked, and just that kind of left them in a space where either they were too traumatized or they were, I don't know, discarded. So you weren't good enough to go to war, you weren't good enough to work in a factory. What are you good for? Why are you still alive? And I was like, how is that not the Indigenous experience in Canada? Like, oh, if you can't do something for us, if you can't give us something, if you can't show up and smudge my house, or if you can't like dance at the powwow for me, I don't want to hear about your politics. I don't want to hear about your problems. I just want you to be here to be consumed. So for me, I was like, yeah, noir, that's that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about PTSD. I want to talk about intergenerational trauma. Um, and I think for me, like, that's been so much of what's been informing my politics was, uh, we have to start working on the healing intercommunity and intergenerationally and internally, and it's a lot of work and we don't talk about it. We're so quick to sort of like medicalize and diagnose, but then it's like, okay, the diagnosis is just here's the chapter you're supposed to go to so you can figure out what it is that you need to do to work through that. And of course a lot of it is you can't, because you're in an incredibly oppressive system. And it's like, I'm reading a lot of texts, like I can't remember his name, but Body Keeps the Score. He's this like fantastic, I don't know if I call him a psychologist, but he worked in revolutionizing PTSD therapy for Vietnam vets. And he also, before that, he was working with a lot of women who were being sent to sanatoriums and, who were getting like lobotomies and electric shock therapy and this kind of stuff. And he was just a young intern at that time, so there wasn't anything he could do, but he would sit with the nurses at the nurse station. He tells a story, and a lot of times the women would come out of their room and just start talking. And as they talked, their demeanor changed. They stopped using baby voice. They stood up straighter. Their eyes cleared. They looked straight in his eyes. And he's like, oh, they don't need surgery. They don't need medicine. They need someone to hear them. And then when he realized afterwards is when he started doing that talk therapy, it wasn't just enough to do the talk therapy. They couldn't go back to their home. He was one of the ones that coined the whole idea that you can't just put somebody right back into a toxic, dangerous environment and expect them to continue the healing. You have to remove them from that environment. Well, how do you remove somebody from an environment that saturates everything? And I think that's like why I wanted to kind of do Hill Agency, and it's going to be messy. Like, and in a lot of ways, I leaned into that. So a lot of what people look at right now with a lot of the art is, oh, there's like Cree and there's syllabics and stuff. I'm like, a lot of that language is wrong. And a lot of that language is wrong on purpose because, and I think this is touching on like what Chris said earlier about like, get into more politics and games and stuff. Like I like to saturate the wrongness in my worlds. So it's not going to be apparent at first. You're going to get in, you're like, this is great, this is fantastic. Then it's going to be like, I'm waiting for it. There will be tweets from Cree speakers being like, that word's wrong. And I was like, I know. Well, that phrase is not right. That's using English grammar. Like, I know. And I think it's going to make people upset, but I'm actually trying to get across that, like, this is a reality a lot of people like me live in, where we could end up in a future where we have our language, but we don't have it, right? Like, we've got what we managed to piece together, like a broken mosaic. And then we, you just go forward. You kind of like you do with what you got and you work forward with the best you got. But yeah, I'm really waiting for people to be like, this is wrong, this isn't right, you brought this up. And I was like, yep. I mean, I'm actually hoping, what I am hoping is years from now, I'm going to look back at this game and I'm going to cringe at how bad the language in it is, because that means that I've grown so much in learning Cree. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to cringing at this in like 20, 30 years.
Yeah, totally. I'm already looking back. I look back at games I made 4 or 5 years ago, and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what was I doing in Neofeud? Oh my goodness, like that shading on that upper lip was just, my goodness. Napoleon Dynamite pictures could be, no, I don't do that to my own work. But I know what you're, I do know what you're saying. It's like there's a lot of stuff that I don't know, that I didn't know about my own culture. Like I still don't know enough. Like I don't speak Hawaiian. It was illegal to speak Hawaiian when I was born. Like I don't know enough of it. I'm trying to recapture more of it. Like every day I try to learn a little bit more history and the language itself, like the word hui. And I'm learning so much as I'm connecting all this together. I didn't know that when I made Neofeud 1, right? So Neofeud 1 is a much more kind of, I hope this helps Chris Patterson, a bit, the other Chris, which is that if you do feel like doomery vibes, listening and hearing from like, a lot of the people in the other 7.4 billion people of Earth that are not, white colonizer Westerners, they're actually not that. They're pretty they're pretty hopeful. I'm reading some African sci-fi. Like they're not writing all this doomery. All of Earth is dead and then we're gonna recolonize Mars and do it again. Every time it's a white Netflix original series, it's always like we're gonna go Elon Musk Europa or something. But like in the like African sci-fi, Asian sci-fi, they're like, oh no, it's a great prosperous civilization and we're actually doing pretty well together, and we're just like mutually trading in digital intergalactic silk roads, and it's pretty good actually. It's mostly just the people that it's like the collapse narrative is very problematic, and they want people in the West to buy that, so that it's a kind of the thing as like the Western so-called civilized world is collapsing, and so they want the East and the global South, who are succeeding at COVID-19, dealing with inequality, dealing with capitalism, like not spending all their money on military so they can provide for the people, and doing mutual cooperative trade across the global South and East. And it's like the West are insecure about their dying. United States is a dying failed so-called civilization. It's just a kind of collection of, it's 3 military companies and oil companies in a stupid Uncle Sam hat carrying a gun, and now it's going away. It's going to be gone soon, And that I hope that like people can take from that like that this kind of unhopeful these kind of narratives to not just doom her out, because that like capitalist realism, there's also kind of Western realism, like without the West everything will be gone and everybody should fail so that the New York Times can feel better about its failed country. Like China, you got to fail so that we feel better about killing 670,000 of our own people. How can you only have 20 cases a day and we have 200,000? You're making us feel bad. I mean, that's because you were the ones who were spreading plague and then blaming Asians, and then you incinerated my ancestors' Chinatown, but you were the one spreading it. And the Hawaiians actually bring this to light, which is like the queen, the elected queen, Liliuokalani, I'm sorry, like investigated the boats that the white people were blaming Chinese for bringing disease into Hawaii, smallpox. She found that she did contact testing and tracing, not unlike the Chinese and Vietnamese, and discovered the Chinese weren't bringing it. It was the white people who were lying about 4 of them had died, and they brought it in the 1800s. That whole narrative about these sick Asians bringing all these plagues in, that was just fear. And it's a valid fear because the Western barbarists with feudal colonial capitalist characteristics, they aren't. They're led by, not to feel something wrong with like the low melanin count. It's just the mass violence and disinformation based ways are just not very productive. Neoliberal countries are really doing really bad. You look at who's doing better at dealing with COVID-19 and who's not. It's all the Western white capitalists. The more neoliberal, the more capitalist, the more colonized you are, the worse you're doing. America, UK, all the worst. Canada, you ain't doing too good up there. Who's doing good? Who's doing good? The Blackfoot, 98%. They would be the highest vaccinated country on earth if they were a country. The Cherokee. Who's doing good? China, Vietnam, Cuba. Who's doing good? And they're going to keep doing good, and we're going to keep doing good. And we have to kind of keep that in mind. So, I mean, to my mind, like cyberpunk, I mean, to answer your question, I go back to your question, Chris, about cyberpunk. I think that it is like, Neofeud is a story of the deep traumas, of being a Native Hawaiian in a stolen country, in a stolen land. And it's a universal story of being in an imperial metropole as a non-white person, as a colonized person internally. In a Mumbai shadow city, in a Brazilian favela, it's a Neofeud's world, that kind of levitating palace at Versailles above an endless landfill crossed with a LA Skid Row crossed with a Johannesburg slum crossed with a shadow city in India, is just, it is about the trauma of like that process and then being brought into the center of a city, and then kind of it doesn't deal specifically with like necessarily what happened exactly in Hawaii, because again, that's part of the how do you I only know how to speak Stormtrooper language. I can't make a game that's like, I didn't know how to make a game as a writer, music artist, programmer that was for the global world, and I didn't have money to localize and all this kind of thing. But I had a thought. I was like, what if I make a game that's just set in Hawaii? It's like cyberpunk Hawaii. Actually, I have a series of stories I wrote a while back that was called like Neon Aloha. It's like actual cyberpunk Hawaii it's all set in Hawaii with sea levels that are 20 feet risen, and it's all like Hawaiian shark tooth neon swords. I had this whole idea, but like I didn't know how to do that. But in the process of leaving Oahu as part of it, I'm coming to the least colonized parts of Hawaii in the Big Island, and we have this. As Meagan, you're saying, kind of like that space to heal from the trauma. And, like I'll say sometimes, you can there's therapy for like an abusive spouse, parent falling out with your ex and the trauma within your childhood. There's no therapy that you can have from capitalism and colonization. There's no therapy for if you're an Asian person, there's no therapy for anti-Asian hate. The entire society is premised on continuing that so we can bomb another 25 Asian countries. There can never be healing from the deepest traumas of the Western barbarous world, the colonizer world. There can never be healing. Ultimately, there can be little pockets of your family and the group that and I one of our my Hawaiian brother that's currently staying with us, he's like, I went to the 8-week sessions, cognitive behavioral therapy. These are your triggers. This is how you stop downward spiraling. This is how you can work to. And he's like, well, I don't feel all better. And it's like, well, that's all we can do for you. Here's some tools. Go back to war. Go back to class war. Go back to fighting the colonizer, because we're not going to change our society so that you can like have a normal whole personhood, but it's your fault. Take some pills and make some money for the pharmaceutical industry. That's the answer. So I think that finding these spaces of healedness, and part of that's land back, I would argue. But part of that is actual decolonization, I would argue. That's part of what we try to do here. So I don't, work with any capitalist corporation or, empire. We try to build economic sovereignty at the Silver Spook Cooperative is because we're trying to build little pockets of healed space in what is 99% tumor in what calls itself the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. I don't know what's going to happen to the UK, but that is deeply deep. There is many decades, if not centuries, of work to do in all of these deeply traumatized, multi-million person so-called countries. And that therapy cannot be done individually on a couch or in a Zoom call with a therapist that's being paid, money from the empire to not fix the actual problems. I think that we have to try to begin to build these spaces to heal ourselves. And cyberpunk is a genre where I feel like cyberpunk is a genre where I see myself in the Villa Straylight. Like I would say, Neofeud is just cyberpunk. It's the Sprawl trilogy, the slums where Case is like he's like literally trying to basically off himself by taking faster and looser deals in Chiba City, right? This kind of night city for all the 16-year-old cyberpunk game players. It's a very like self-destructive, and that's kind of who I was. That's who everybody is in Oahu to a certain extent, and sometimes you self-destruct. And it's a ghetto where there's all these people that are living in poverty. And I look up the hill. I'm like, yeah, the Villa Strela it's not in space. Like there's mansions like literally in space, like in Elysium or in Neofeud, they're floating right above your head. But like the hilltops are covered with like Larry Ellison's. You've got Mark Zuckerberg, 1,200-acre ranch over there. You've got all of these rich people like right on top of the hill in Aiea, on the hills of Manoa. Some of them college professors, by the way, like Andrade, who fenced 700 acres north of Mark Zuckerberg real estate, at the University of Hawaii, by the way. And you've got all of these rich, wealthy people, usually of a particular color. And then underneath that, you've got all these Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, Asian, Black, poor, some of them are poor white, but disproportionately it's like Asian Pacific Islander. And I'm like, and we all have phones and high tech and we're all low lifes, We're not low life, but we're impoverished and then doing things that we don't want to do, like, I don't know, sell illegal things and sell drugs and join the Bloods and the Crips. I mean, sometimes like they listen to too much reactionary sort of music coming out of LA, but there are actual gang violence, and I had kids that they're in prison for the rest of their life or they're dead in the area that I'm in. And as a social worker, it's like trying to I can't heal all these kids in Kalihi Palama. I can't heal all the survivors of the Chinatown fire. I can't heal them all internally. I can't make them. Even if I get them a competency-based diploma program, all the real-life protojays, it's going to take a lot more than that, And Neofeud is not, it doesn't offer like a lot of real solutions by the end of it. But I hope that Neofeud 2 does offer more, but it requires like but again, so I'm just kind of saying, like, that's when I say, like, I'm half stormtrooper. I'm not joking about that. I'm trying my best to heal make sure that my children don't. I have to address the difficult harm. My father denies. I fight with my dad over whether Canada is committing genocide against Indigenous people. He says he's more Hawaiian and Asian than anything else. He denies to my face constantly. Canada and the Catholic Church do not commit genocide. Kids got a tuberculosis. He has a master's degree. He taught at the university level. He is fully educated, and he hangs out with very smart people at the university system. And you know what they like to do? They like to deny genocide of the Hawaiians and he still does this. And it's very painful. But you know what that means? That's a very painful split. And I have to love him from far away. But that's something that has to happen so that I have to break that. I can't just go, well, I'm just going to do that too, and I'll just be another stormtrooper with academic characteristics. I'll just be another stormtrooper making games for a fucking AAA game, military simulators, and I'll let my kids deal with the hard, painful healing later on. I got to do that now so that they can grow up in a little space of non-cancer, non-imperial lies, so that, and hopefully they will be able to spread out and grow, something actually healed from that trauma. I have to try my best, and the people that, when I see like the people that are doing the pipeline protests, the people that are actually all the way in for land back, they're building those actually pockets of healed space in illegitimate settler colonial empires, and I hope that it is difficult. It will be personally, it is painful. You're gonna have to look at a lot of your relatives, your family, your friends, your bosses, your work network, your social network. And it's going to be very painful because some other people around you are going to disagree, and you're going to lose you're going to lose in some ways. But I can't ask anybody to do exactly what we've done, just jumping ship from all the, anyway, but you have to look at it and go like, but what is the possibility that Canada will ever allow, deal with the housing crisis? What is the possibility that you will ever have healthcare in America? I would argue you never will. America needs no one to have healthcare so they can recruit for the military. That's how they do it. They go, you want healthcare? Join the military, or you can be a homeless, healthcareless Hawaiian. So, anyway, I've said up many words, but I hope that answers some of the question about. That doesn't really answer the cyberpunk question, but that is when I see cyberpunk. It's more about dealing with those traumas, and there is to, I don't know. I don't play all the cyberpunk games, and I know that there's more, but a lot of it is reactionary. It's reacting to that, and I hope that, it's dealing with, it's a cautionary tale, but then there are ways to, like, Neofeud 2, I hope is like half of it's cautionary, and the other half is like you exit America and you go to like advanced Asian civilizations and in Pacific Islander civilizations, and that's something that it is new. I don't really know what that is. I'm trying to figure out what that is. I'm trying to figure out what being Hawaiian means right now. So I really think that like it's a thing that we have to discover, like, what does that actually mean to have I think a solar punk and like hope punk. I'm looking at all these different things and taking inspiration from them. But anyway, that was not as coherent as I would have liked it. But I hope that answers some of your question, Chris.
Can confirm that a lot of cyberpunk outside of like what you do, Silver Spook, is extremely reactionary and afraid of Asian powers. It's a lot of it's kind of trash. It's like at one time it was literally just anti-Japanese.
It definitely began that way.
You could see that. Yeah, exactly. And you could see it with fucking Cyberpunk 2077, like very, very easily. And it's like, so explain to me how this fear of Japanese capitalism is any different from like American capitalism. Like, I feel like it's just projection.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. It's Asian, the Asian characters everywhere, that's one thing I'm not going to do that. I'm not just going to put Asian characters in neon all over things. And, yeah, it's like dystopia is when Asians run things, and then there's sex workers and then drugs. Like as if there aren't like, sex workers and drugs, that's not a thing that's around. I mean, not that, that's not, it's just weird. Like what is viewed as like, oh, this is a hellish, terrible place to be in. You know, when it's a lot of it is just yellow peril. It's like, oh my goodness, you know, Harrison Ford has to eat Asian food. You know, I mean, yeah.
What's wrong with ramen?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like they are afraid of sex workers. Holy shit. Like they act like the entire society breaks down, and then like the sex workers come out and they can be out in the open now. It's like, okay then.
They mostly come out at night. Mostly.
Exactly.
Sorry, just see your picture, and like all I could think of was from Aliens was just like these xenomorph sex workers coming out of the vents of like, yeah, that's probably how they see things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. No, I had this idea for this. I had like actual cyberpunk game. It was like you play. You know the ramen guy from Blade Runner. The guy, you know, like Rick Deckard. Speaking of cyberpunk, you know, he's like 224. You know, and he's like he's being a sad white boy. You know, in his trench coat. Oh no, I can't be a cop, and you know, I don't know, mass incarcerate black people and do terrible things. You know, and he's all like down in the dumps in the terrible dystopian Los Angeles in the future, right? Or now it's in the past, I guess. But anyways, you know, and there's that Asian, right? The Asian noodle shop runner, and he's like, "Give me my food, 224," and it is the Asian character just kind of in the background. You know, it's like they're not really a character. They're just kind of there to cook the food for sad white protagonists, man. And there's this kind of like I had this idea for this game where and then right around the time there's all this, you know, all the, I mean, there still are ongoing Asian attacks. 4,000, you know, 2,000, 4,000 plus. It's gone up, like, I know Chris, you said 800% in Vancouver. It's just horrific. It's always been bad. There's always been Asian hate. Nobody knows about it. And I was like, you know, I want a cyberpunk game where you play the Asian food, the Asian noodle shop owner who just beats up white guys showing up to kill, you know, elderly Asians in Chinatown, you know, and that's like, you know, that like, you know, just like, you know, like kicking butt in all these white supremacists showing up to do mass violence, like the Atlanta shooter, you know, like, you know, I feel like there's something, you know, there's something to that, because that's such a deep thing. And it's like, why are the Asians always just in the background with their signs and their geisha on a wall, and that's just scary, and then cooking everyone's food? But nobody knows it's because, well, I mean, a lot of white workers freaked out, and along with the white capital, I was just reading about how Jack London and newspaper writers were talking about how like white labor and white capital have to get together and wipe out the Asians, you know, in the Chinese Exclusion Act, and then that they can only be restaurant runners and laundromat operators, you know, and that's like not even recognized. Like that, like it's just like in the background. Like at least some people recognize, you know, some of the other, you know, like they don't fully recognize the anti-blackness and the Hispanicness and anti-indigeneity. But the Asian one is just like, it's not even on it has not never been on the radar, but it's just so little on the radar. And I feel like there's something to that. Anyway, that was just an idea that I had. I was just thinking about, you know, like, let's just flip the whole script. You know, that's mostly what I do, is just flip all of the, you know, I basically like punk all of the pop cultural, you know, things in you know, with Neofeud and all the games that I make. But yeah, no, there's something totally going on. There's something really backward going, and I think that Cyberpunk 2077 being made, it's kind of like, you know, it doesn't really deal with any of that. You know, it kind of just, it gives you kind of like 2020 lenses on William Gibson's you know, Neuromancer, and kind of misses a lot of the, what I think is important critiques of, you know, the Reaganomics and Thatcheronomics. And you know, not that Gibson got everything right in the time, but I feel like at least he tried to say something, and it's missing a lot of that. And so yeah.
Can I just, I have to go in like 5 minutes, but I wanted to ask one more question. Kind of going back to what Silver Spook and others were saying about like trauma and mental health in games. And I'm just going through this a lot with my students right now, because the first game I have them play is Depression Quest. You know, as a way to just kind of get off the bat, like, you know, we have to talk about Gamergate and all that, and misogyny and patriarchy in games. And Depression Quest is known for inciting a lot of, or, you know, just being at the center of a lot of those. But once we get out of that once we establish that context, usually there's always a moment where like, well, what is this game actually about? It's about depression. It's about seeing games as how they relate to mental health, and I always get interesting reactions to that because just knowing that one of the main creators was, well, I think they go by they now, but at the time was like female identified, was always very interesting for the students because even especially in games, I feel like mental health is often just seen as something that like Silver Spook was saying, like self-destruction, suicidal ideation. These are things that happen to like white men, and they need to have their like forms of release, otherwise they're going to do something violent and hurt the rest of us in some way. Like that seems to be like the media depiction. Whereas for everybody else, it's just like, well, they just deal with it and however. And so it's always kind of fascinating to me to think about how like games are like part of mental health. Kind of, I don't know. I wouldn't call it like self-care regimes, but how people play games as a way, as forms of dealing in one way or the other. And what my students usually say is like they feel like they're not alone when they're playing a game, even if it's a game just by themselves. Like if they play that game for like many hours, like 50 hours or something, they eventually feel such a weird intimacy with it that it's almost like they're not as isolated as they were before. Which I feel like is something that that streaming right now is really kind of picking up on as well. Like, because now you're not only not alone, you're also like actually involved in this whole culture and everything. There's this great, just to like throw another essay out there. There's one called, what was it? Replaying Video Game History as Mixtape of Black Feminist Thought, which is by like 4 game studies, black women who do game studies. And it's all different kinds of genres that they go through. They do interviews and things like that, but they all tell their story about why they got into games. And one of them, who's actually the eldest, Anna Everett, she's the first black woman to do game studies. Maybe not the first, but she's like known for that. But she said the first thing that got her into it was she was like at a conference and it was about media, but this guy who was like representing the police, he was like a police officer or something, was talking to a lot of the students, and he said, when white men play these shooting games, they just kind of do it as a release. But when you have like black kids in the community playing shooting games, they don't know that, they can't really tell a difference whether it's a game or not, and they'll start mimicking what happens. And so, of course, like insanely racist, but also something that...
Yeah, yikes.
Yeah, I know. Like, part of me thinks that hasn't really left a lot of the way people think about games. It's like, this is a nice mental health release for white men particularly, but then for everyone else, there's kind of like this... It has this weird ideological hold, which I don't find true at all.
Yeah, I'm actually schizophrenic, and a lot of the times when I play video games, it's just to express myself, but I never ever see myself in video games. Like, the closest I can get to is like when like a character has like a dark demon inside them that they have to deal with, like stuff like that. It's the only time I ever get betrayed is in like caricatures of the person who's broken that needs to be fixed, or the violent person who needs to be stopped because they might do horrible things because they're in power now, and it's I hate it. Because yeah, this is actually one of the things I talk about on my channel is mental illness and how it's portrayed inside of video games, that in like native people, how they're caricaturized, and fucking just basically everything. Like we're like, native people are like the level 1 enemies that you fight, and because they're just so primitive, that kind of shit. And like schizophrenic people tend to like they tend to be like the villains that you do, like because you got to stop them from hurting themselves. So fucking and it's like the other thing is like they never like, they always portray like schizophrenic people, or like people who are DID or whatever, as like white men. That's another thing that's interesting. Like, it's almost like nobody else can be schizophrenic or something. Or if they do, they get like native people. We get diagnosed as savage instead of like schizophrenic. Like I got a story for another time, but yeah, like the way that we get portrayed in media is ridiculous.
Yeah. Totally. It's definitely it's a thing that's. Yeah. Another dealing with mental health in games is in the horror genre is not too good on that. But Chris, is there something if you want to? Did you want a specific thing answered from me, or you got it? I know you said you got to go.
Yeah, I do actually have to go now.
Okay.
No, that was a really fascinating answer. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll try and check out your channel more. That sounds like the kind of thing I'm interested in too. I was watching these was it Eurogamer? They did the YouTube series on mental called low batteries or something like that, and they had this whole part on. Some of it was pretty good, but they had this whole episode devoted to Hellblade, and how great it was at depicting schizophrenia, and it was just really interesting. They seemed to I don't know what the hell was going on with that, but it was kind of.
I haven't played that game, but from the looks of it, I don't know if I agree.
No, yeah, no. I mean, I'm mostly going off the basis of people I know who've talked about that game, and a lot of players who have tried to take it to task. But yeah, it's definitely a lot of things getting wrong or being used as a kind of. Yeah.
I just wish people could just tell their own experiences. That's it.
Yeah, but anyway, if you do have to go, Chris, yeah, we should probably be wrapping up. Actually, it's about 2 hours. We're a little over the 2 hour mark.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, if you just want to, give your, final, where we can find you, anything else that you want to say, everybody, again, definitely, I recommend, specifically for gamers, open world, Empire, game players, game developers, etc. is very, very. I am reading that book. I'm in it. Rereading parts of it. It's very good. It's very comprehensive, like I said. So I do recommend that to anybody who's interested in learning about how Empire and games intersect and a variety of other things that you can learn from it. But yeah, go ahead, Chris. Anything else you want to, or we can find you, etc.
You can find me on Twitter at Kavika Guillermo, and you can also just email me. If you just look up my name, I have a profile at UBC, and just email me if you want. Especially if you're looking at Open World Empire, reading the book. There's also an audiobook for Open World Empire if you want to listen to it as you're playing a game, which is how I listen to most audiobooks. But I would really like to know what folks think of it. I've been talking to a lot of developers in this kind of Asia/American project I'm doing. We had 20 developers to talk to about that. And Silver Spook was one of them. But I am writing a kind of sequel or companion text to it, so it's mostly based on the reception of that book and all the things that I kind of wish I had put into it, for a larger audience who might actually be able to enact some of, or who I feel it gets left out a bit of the academic world and academic publishing. So yeah, just if you have a chance, pick up the book or read excerpts from it. I think you can probably find the intro online somewhere. It's on the NYU Press website.
Yeah, awesome.
I'll go now. Thanks. It was good to be in conversation with y'all.
Yeah, nice
thanks.
meeting you.
Bye.
Yeah, thanks.
Take care.
Bye. Yeah. So full disclosure, I'm gonna be, like I said, I'm gonna be guest lecturing, and you have to get Neofeud to take this class at University of British Columbia. So everybody
Correct.
join the class, okay? Everyone in the stream, you gotta sign up for this class. I'm just kidding. But yeah, no, it is on the list of games to play. So that's yeah, that is something I'm looking forward to. I'm gonna be teaching that. I'm gonna be guest lecturing on October 15th. I'm not sure if it's open to the public though. So, anyways, Meagan, Meagan, you want to go ahead and give your final closing thoughts?
Do my out. Yeah, no, this was fun. Thanks so much. I always enjoy being on these streams. I guess you can catch me. I'm not really online anymore. I think if you want to see my personal stuff, it's available on Byrne, my last name, BYRNE, out .itch.io. Me and my brothers share a username, so if you play Call of Duty or anything like that, you see Burnout, it might be one of my brothers. Yeah, so that's where my personal stuff is, and then Yeah, my studio is Achimosdawistan Games, or achimogames.ca, and Achimo Games on Twitter. And Hill Agency, barring anything else happening with this freaking pandemic, should be out either late summer or early fall next year. So the end is in sight. I've been working on this game since 2017. I could finally get it out and didn't work on something else.
Yay!
But it's gonna be great. I'm really excited. And it's not just me. I'm not the only Indigenous person working on this project. It's not just like me and a bunch of other people. It's like me and Scarajones, and Maurizia, who is an amazing Indigenous modeler, and actually probably one of the most senior Indigenous modelers in North America.
Wow. Yeah, awesome. I'm really, like I said, we're looking forward to this in summer or fall. I'm gonna hold you to that. It better come out, because otherwise I'm just gonna be bored for the whole summer and fall.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Don't disappoint Chris.
And then I might finish Neofeud 2
stream
by that time, and that'll be, I hope to get. Some people keep asking, when is my game coming out? I'm like, you're probably gonna get. I shouldn't say that, but I don't know. I'm trying to get it done as quick as possible, but I am looking forward to Hill Agency. I've been following this game for a long time. I try to drop this shares to the Achimo games, and I do want to see it come out, because I'm sure I'm gonna learn a lot from it when it does come out as well. So everybody do follow Achimo games and Burn Out on Itch, etc. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us, Meagan.
Thank you. All right, I'm out.
Okay, bye.
Take care.
All right, Della, your turn.
Everybody's fun part. Yeah, I'm just on Wolves.Fane on Twitch, the Indigenous half of that channel. We haven't really been talking a whole lot about specifically mental illnesses lately. We've been talking about like childism lately, but every once in a while, me and like I'll have say it in honor of somebody who's colonized, and we'll talk about like the colonized experience. But yeah, I hope to see you all there.
Yeah, definitely support. I think a lot of people here in the community already know who Della is, but it's important. Everybody should follow Lilith Fane if you don't already. And Della has been doing like a lot of helping out a lot of communities, including ours and a bunch of other online left and Indigenous streamers, etc. So yeah, and I know you guys just did a fundraiser. I believe Satan's Ghost did a. Yeah,
we were raising money for our rent this time, but it's usually we're like raising funds for people to just be out on the street.
Yeah. So if are you guys still running that, or you guys okay, or do you need are you gonna do another one, or?
We're gonna have to do another one.
Okay, well, everybody definitely support Della and Lilith, because people they definitely could use the help for everybody. This is why we need land back, so we don't have to be having to get money to give to landlords at some point. But until then, we do have to do all the support, get all the financial support to all the people that need it. So definitely help Della and Lilith Fane in the future fundraisers, and if you can just drop them something, please support them, because they do so much for everyone. So thanks specifically to you, Della, because I know we don't always talk, so thank you so much for all the work that you do.
Me.
Yeah, and all of your moderation work and everything else, and Lilith also. And Lilith, I know you guys have all played the game on the stream, so these are longtime Silver Spook supporters. So yeah. So anyway,
and if you're sick of us all asking for rent, help us with land back.
There you go. That's what I'm saying. I think of this way. It's kind of like you're gonna do a lot of hours of work, raising money for rent. I mean, if you're just working or doing fundraisers, but if everybody put the same amount of, if everybody put like 1/10 of the amount of work they put into working to make money in capitalism for rent into land back, nobody would pay rent ever again. I mean, it just makes sense. It's just gonna pay off in the long run,
Yeah, it's a good investment.
It's a good investment, even from that perspective. So yeah. So anyway, thanks so much, Adela, for always good to talk to you. Thanks for coming on, and
take care, friend.
Yeah, have a good relative. Anyways, so anyway, this is the end of the Silver Spook stream. Oh, I just destroyed everything. Oops. You can't. Well, I shouldn't have done that. I just destroyed. I cyberpunked myself. I just nuked myself off of the internet. Oops. Sorry. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much everybody for tuning in and joining in on the Silver Spook decolonized gaming panel. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not the most professional when I manage it on my own stream with these panels, but you know, that's part of the cyberpunkness with the capital PUNK is, you know, it's like a zine from the 90s, you know, it's like, you know, it's like a handcrafted with lots of, you know, improper shading and, you know, sometimes misspelled sentences in your you know, text, your text adventure, you know, like, you know, Extreme Meat Punks or, you know, Neofeud, you know, it's got a few bugs, not as many as Cyberpunk 2077, so I would say that, but you know, so the Silver Spook streams are very cyberpunk in that way. And thank you everybody for tuning in. I hope that you have learned something. Do check out all of these games again, Hill Agency and the book Open World Empire, and of course Neofeud. Neofeud is on sale right now, so if you have $4.50, it's on Steam and itch.io. You can pick it up and have an indigenous created, anti-capitalist, anti-colonization cyberpunk game about these experiences made by poverty line social services and STEM teacher trying to do whatever healing, harm reduction, and also land back in Hawaii as possible. And you support Neofeud too, and also the Silver Spook Hui and cooperative/commune when you help us out here by picking up the game or becoming a Patreon. Anyways, until next time, keep your mirror shades polished, be excellent to each other, and thanks again, Holly, of course, for moderating. And what's up, Silverface, Lilith Fane. You know, we love you all. Well, we love you all. Aloha, mahalo, and go forth and do your kuleana and live in Pono, as we would say in Hawaii. Okay, bye.